Hello! It's not Mr. Youngsaver here, it's Mr. Taylor. If you haven't watched the 4.1 Skew the Script, it's really good. It covers a lot of the materials that I'm about to talk about but I'm going to hit a couple more things to make sure you understand them. In our book, I don't normally like books, but I love our book. It's fantastic. If you haven't opened it recently, maybe you should go get it right now. I'm on page 249. So we're talking about sampling and surveys. You need to know that one of the reasons we do sample is we have some population, which is typically a very large group, and to find out a characteristic like maybe average height or opinion about a particular topic, we'd have to do a census and talk to everyone in the population or gather all the data if the populations are not people. So what we do instead is we take a sample and we use that sample to infer something about the characteristics. Now there are dangers in doing this because we can get bad samples, but if you do things correctly, you have some certainty that your sample is representative of the population. Okay, so a sample survey is simply a study that collects data from a sample to learn about the population from which the sample was selected. I got an incoming call. There's this thing on page 250 which talks about who wrote the federal papers. This is very much like the Beyonce thing we did, so you might want to go take a look at that. A convenience sample. Boo, we don't like these. They're not terrible. Sometimes we have to do them, but I talked about this in class. That would be like me polling the class about how much homework they have per night, and that is not a good sample if I am trying to project that onto the population of all of Oakland Tech, because our class is somewhat representative of the entire population, but by the nature of being an AP Stats student, you probably have more homework than other students because you're taking AP Stats and probably several other AP classes. So that's the problem with convenience sampling, is they're easy to get at, but oftentimes you are creating bias, which comes up in just a page here. There it is, bias. So bias is any time you do something, feels like it's not quite focused, that causes you to underestimate or overestimate the value you want to know. So once again, if I was going to get the hours of amount you study for my AP class, I'm probably overestimating that for the entire population, also because you're largely juniors and seniors and you have more homework than the freshmen and sophomores, usually. In the same way, if I ask how many hours of sleep you get a night, I may be underestimating that for the entire population. Voluntary response. This is the notoriously bad like internet surveys where people can opt in, and the problem is it's people who tend to want to respond. It's not everybody. So while it may give you some data, you're really dangerous in projecting that on the population as a whole. It's really only telling you what's true about people who are willing to do a poll and turn it back in. And then there's a really hilarious thing about Bodie McBoatface in England. Let's see. Random sampling. That's where we pick people at random to be included in the sample, or things at random to be included in the sample. And our gold standard is a simple random sample. This is where we basically say I'm going to get n, maybe 10, whatever, in a group, and we create the randomness such that any person or thing in the group has an equal chance of being selected. That's really important because if you don't do that, you've created bias. If for some reason your selection method favors one type of person or subject matter more than another. We're going to do one like this in a second. There is a way to do this with technology, which I've shown you how, random number generator. But there's also a table in the back of the book, and I'll explain that briefly at the end here. I'm not going to go long. In fact, on page 256, it also explains how to do this, if you want to look at that page. If you've done the Justin Timberlake Desmos that I've given you, you did a stratified random sample. You did one by rows, and you did one by columns, where it got two people out of each row, or one person out of each column, and therefore managed to get 10, and there were advantages and disadvantages to doing that. In the same way, there is something called cluster sampling. In the Justin Timberlake example, we got two columns of data, so we got 5 and 5 for a complete column, and there's advantages and disadvantages to doing that. Oftentimes we pick these other methods other than simple random samples because they are either more convenient, or in the case of the stratified random sampling, we want to make sure we include representation from different groups. And the example they give in the book a lot is at a high school, if you're doing an opinion poll about something and you're getting 40 random people, you might want to make sure you get 10 freshmen, 10 sophomores, 10 juniors, and 10 seniors, because they're going to have varying different opinions. And then within each one of those strata, each one of those layers, strata means layer, you would randomly select 10 from each class. So there's still randomness, but you're making sure you're being representational of groups that you think are important, lest you accidentally get 40 seniors in your totally random survey. It's not likely to happen, but it could. Okay, systematic random sampling. This is really interesting. In the Justin Timberlake one, this is where we picked some number and then we went across the rows, and then every seventh person we grabbed, and when we got to the end, we wrapped back around. It's just an interesting way to guarantee that you're getting people who've been organized in a way more systematically. It's a good name, actually. Undercoverage. This is a problem that we can have when we somehow have not included groups, and the most notorious thing for this is a lot of election polling. Depending on how it does it, you may not get certain groups. You may just get people who are willing to answer their phone and take a survey. So that can create undercoverage, which creates bias. In the same way, non-response is a problem with surveys. And this is where you try to survey people, but only certain people respond. In some way, the non-response is not answering your phone, but it's a little bit different. This is actually knowing that groups have been left out, and this is just not really knowing what's the deal with those people who didn't respond. What's left? I'm almost done. Let's see. And then response bias in and of itself is the tool that you use, especially like the questions you ask, can actually cause people to give answers. And there was a really good one in the Skew the Script where he asked a very funny question about, do you like Guy Fieri in very positive terms versus boring Alton Brown, which I felt so sad about because I love Alton Brown. But the way the question was worded, you would be very likely to respond favorably to one answer versus the other. Happens all the time. Nice little summary here. It's not a super long thing. I would definitely go back and read the summary. It talks about all those things I just mentioned. And we're going to do a couple of quick questions before I end it here. Okay, so I'm going to do evens because you can check out the odds in the back of the book. And as a reminder, one of the reasons our book is so excellent, if you go to the online site, anywhere there's one of these little things, there's a video that goes with it that explains the entire question. Okay, so there's no reason I should ever have to explain one of those in class. All right, so I'm on page 264 if you want to read along, or you can pull it up in the book. In fact, I may ask you a question about page 264 right now. So 264 is the summary there. Anyway, okay, here's what we're going to do. So student archaeologist, an archaeological dig turns up large numbers of pottery shards, broken stone tools, and other artifacts. Student working on the project to classify each artifact and assign a number to it. The counts in different categories are important for understanding the site, so a project director chooses 2% of the artifacts at random and checks the sample, the student's work, identify the population and the sample. So the sample is the 2% that he selected, and the population is all of the artifacts found. Okay, next one. Number 6 on page 265. Once again, this looks a little blurry. How much sleep do... Oh, no, wrong one. Parade Magazine. Where am I? Can I see it there? Yeah, right there. Parade Magazine posed the following question. Should drivers be banned from using all cell phones? Readers were encouraged to vote online at parade.com. The subsequent issue of Parade reported the results. 2407, 85% said yes, and 410, 15% said no. What type of sample did the Parade survey obtain? So I think there's two answers here. First of all, it's convenience sample, because they're just getting people who will respond. And then second of all, it's it's voluntary. So that's the other way you could say it. Explain why this sample is biased. It's biased because, oh, let me finish reading the question. Is 85% probability greater than or less than the true percent of all adults who believe that all cell phones used while driving should be banned? Why? So it's definitely biased because it's only people who care enough about this and who read Parade magazine. I would assume it's greater. It's pretty extreme, although I think a lot of us think it's pretty bad to drive with your cell phone. But I would think it was probably a little bit high. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I had one more I was going to do. I was going to do this number 12, but we'll take care of that in class of how to randomize this. The easy answer for how to randomize it is to put all the names in a hat, shake up the hat, and pull one out. That's the answer you want to give on the AP exam. The second answer is you number them and then use some kind of random number generator to pick up numbers without replacement. And then the third answer, which is this line 117, there's actually a table of random numbers in the back of the book, and there's a way to say, okay, which one do I grab? Rather than getting it out of your calculator. Okay, that's long enough. Ciao.